So hello and welcome to another episode of Stephen's Four Wheels. Today we're going to do another little bit of a sit down and discussion video. Now I've decided I want to make use of my summer chair because I only ever use this chair in the summer, and hence why it's called my summer chair in the garden. A nice warm day, preferably with a cider in one hand and maybe a book in the other hand. It also does fold back, but if I stay there for too long it probably will send me to sleep, so we best not. We'll stay up right for this one. So the topic today I want to talk about was what really got me into Mercedes. Now, you might have guessed if you're a regular subscriber to the channel that I do quite like my Mercedes. I currently own three. I have owned four at the beginning of last year. That's four all at one time. I'm currently down to three, which is sort of a nice acceptable level. So if you're new to the channel, maybe it's the first, second video you've watched, why not hit that subscribe button? It's completely free of charge to do. It really helps me out. It really shows that you guys are actually liking what I'm doing. You want to come back and see more. You obviously not only get to see me, you also get to see more my SLK and more of my SR and even occasionally the B class. So at the moment, I currently think I've got quite a nice selection of cars. I've got one modern daily driver that does my boring daily work. I've got this, which is my 1999 R170. I've got an R170 and R107, which gets confusing. An R170 SLK 230 1999, which you've seen before, bought for £500. I've done quite a bit of work to it since, but this is my modern classic. I've also then, as a contrast, I've got my classic 1985 107 SL, which I really like, I really enjoy. That's my cars. And again, there's a theme there, isn't there? They're all Mercs. They're all slightly different Mercs. They all do a slightly different role and fit in my life slightly differently. But let's wind back a bit, because why have I always been passionate about Mercs? Well, I think I've always been a massive car enthusiast. I do believe that you are born a car enthusiast. I don't believe that you just wake up one day and decide, well, I'm going to get involved in cars today and start being nerdy about cars. I don't think you quite do that. A lot of the people I speak to, friends and lifelong car enthusiasts, say that I've always been interested in cars ever since before I can remember. And that's very much the same for me. I can always remember playing with cars, always remember being interested in cars growing up, always remember going to car shows as a kid and just generally being interested. If I saw something interesting coming, I was walking down the road and there was something interesting, I'd go and have a look at it. And I don't remember there being a time where I wasn't really interested in cars. And when I was a teenager, it was very much one of my big goals was to learn to drive, which I did when I was 17, as soon as you could. Which is here, 17 is the sort of legal age for learning to drive in the UK. And obviously, things have escalated a little bit since having little model cars. I always remember I had, and I have to say I've still got it, I've still got some of my model toy cars that I had when I was a kid. And I did have a Mercedes SL 129 in like a maroon colour. And I always remember that car. It's one car. I don't remember that many cars I had when I was a kid, but I always remember I had that car as one of my favourites. So maybe it was a bit subliminal, even when I was a little kid playing with cars. And I think most car enthusiasts had one of those sort of plain mats that have like a sort of road on them. It's sort of like a mat with like a 2D printed sort of road or town thing on it. And I always remember you driving the cars one there, parking them up, all that sort of stuff that you do, and it's very exciting when you're sort of 3 or 4. Not quite so much now. I've got sort of the bigger toys to play with now, and the toys have got a lot more expensive. That's the other thing I will say. Now, the first car I sort of remember really being interested in was my dad had one of the very first, what was the W202, the first of the C classes, and he had company cars at the time, and he'd always had many British cars. He'd had a couple of Austin Rovers. He really quite liked the Rover, but I think he had some issues with the last Rover he had. So he eventually went to have one of the first Ford Mondeos when they came out in the mid-90s. And he liked that car, but he had a big issue where the bottom of it was basically made from cardboard. So as you can imagine, he does lots of miles out in all weathers in his Mondeo. And the bottom of it basically degraded away and all water got into electrics, and the car ended up going back to whoever it was they sent it back to, because it was a company car. Now, during this time when he was sort of in between cars and deciding what he wanted to have next, my dad stopped at Mercedes-Benz in Exeter, parents had a caravan down in Devon. So one trip either up or down, they my dad decided he wanted to stop off and go and have a look at this new C-Class which had just come out. So I don't remember the trip to the dealership, but I do remember the car my dad eventually had as a company car, and it was a C250 diesel. It wasn't a turbo; it was a regular plain Jane naturally aspirated diesel. Because he loved miles, diesel made more sense to him. And I do remember spending a lot of time in the back of that car, going up and down the motorway, back and forth from down the M5 to Devon, and I do remember spending a lot of time in that car. I quite remember I even can remember the sort of the fabric. It had fabric, these fabric seats. I can actually remember the sort of pattern on them, which is very strange. Some people remember sort of going away for the first time, and there's me remembering the fabric on these seats. And so I remember these cars that he had when he was growing up. And I think that probably has sort of ignited that passion for Mercs in me. I've always seen it as being something you have when you've done well. You know, when you're doing well for yourself, you buy a Mercedes. And I think not necessarily, for me, it's not necessarily I want to show the world that I'm doing well. It's for me, I want to prove to myself that I've done well. And my first Mercedes, I should say, was an R172 SLK, so sort of the third generation SLK. And I've owned that car up till last year. Had it for 6 years, really loved that car, but it didn't quite fit in. It was my only Mercedes at the time. I then bought the B Class to sort of take some miles off the SLK, and the B Class has been fantastic. I then bought this for £500, I couldn't really say no to. And then also the SL turned up as well. So I had three cars that I had basically second cars almost as weekend cars. And I've only got two spaces in his garage. Now I wanted to put the SL in there because that's quite a valuable car, and that's a car that really does deserve being costed in a garage. I want to put this SLK in here. It was a toss up between this or the new SLK. So, and ultimately, I knew, I've explained this before, I knew that this was going to be probably the worthwhile car to hang on to. It's possibly going to go up in there. I certainly can't lose any more money on it because it's still not worth that much. This car, it's probably worth about £2,000. So, I don't feel like I can lose any more money on this car. So eventually my new SLK I decided to sell, which was quite a tough decision. It was that first Mercedes that I bought, and I had lots of memories in that car, lots of fun. And one of my sort of last memories of that car was taking it over to Wales and doing a little road trip over there. And it was possibly the one trip that I did, and I thought, do I really want to sell this car? And ultimately, the answer was yes, because it just didn't fit in my life anymore. If I'm going out to car shows, I'm more excited this or the SL and actually get more pleasure out of these cars now because there's all little bits and pieces you can do to them. So one of the things I've thinking of recently was, why do I own these cars that I own, and why am I passionate about them? I really am a big Mercedes enthusiast. I think I could possibly go out there and buy loads of other cars if I wanted to. I'd love to get in some more sort of niches. The other day, of some ways, I found myself looking at the first generation A Class and the A210 Evolution, and God knows why I started looking at these cars. But again, I'd love to get more into the niches, and I'm very much having to stop myself from going out and buying more cars. Definitely three cars that I'm going to keep long term is enough. I've mentioned before, I might possibly have another one as a sort of car it's going to be. So I'm really passionate about Mercedes, but why am I passionate about these cars? Why do I own these cars, and why do these reflect my passion for Mercedes? Well, the R170 I bought for £500. I bought because it was a cheap car. It had 7 months MOT in it. The roof worked. When it drove, it was fine for what I wanted. And for £500, I thought, let's take a risk on it, do a few bits on it, and if it doesn't work out, I can always sell it on. And eventually, I started to absolutely fall for this car. It took about a year to absolutely fall in love with this car, and it's one of the reasons why I sold my newer R172 SLK, because I absolutely just fell in love with this car. I'm also hoping that these will go up in value a little bit as it stands. This car's probably worth about £2,000, so it's not really worth me selling. I've got more money in this car than that. And to be honest, for £2,000, what else could I get for the money? Thankfully, I'm not in a position where I need to sell this car for the money. And I sort of feel that this is very much an underappreciated car. People that have them really love them, but the outside world almost doesn't quite appreciate them. They appreciate Audi TTs, Porsche Boxers, all those sort of cars, and I kind of like an underdog. Now, we guys remember that the R170, it came out at a time when Mercedes were trying to get into a new market. They were trying to get to younger buyers. They were trying to get into new markets they haven't done before. We think of things like the A class, think of the M class that came out all in sort of the mid to late 90s, and obviously the SLK. Now, the SLK had its trump card of that folding Vario roof, which really set it apart from anything else. I think it was the first sort of mass produced car that had a very much a folding hardtop arrangement. So for me, this is quite a significant car for Mercedes history. And again, because I'm passionate about Mercedes, I know a bit more about the history. So for me, that's why I like this car. It's a bit of an underdog. Now, the same can't be said for the car that's behind this, my RAR 107 380 SL from 1985. That really is an icon of Mercedes. If you think of classic Mercedes, someone's a classic Mercedes, chances are someone's either likely to say an S Class or an SL, and might be Pagoda, it might be an original 300 SL, or it might be a 107 SL. So for me, that car is an icon. I sort of felt like I needed something that was a dream car for me. Now, those cars are very much going in value. I also like the 126 coupes, the SECs at the same time as well. I absolutely love one of those as well. However, I think one classic car for me is more than enough. So the R107 SL is very much an aspirational car for me. It's a car I've always dreamed about owning. Never actually thought I would. The values of them are going up constantly, very steadily. So I turned 30, and that's when I started to think about what do I want to do with cars now. Because much as I loved my 172 SLK, it wasn't necessarily what I wanted anymore. I think I just purchased this one, and again, I was really enjoying it. But I really wanted to get a car for me that was very aspirational. I wanted a car that was a dream car. Now, for me, that was going down the classic route. I've never owned a classic car, and I went out with the view to buy a classic car, and that's what I really wanted. Now, I did think about buying something else. However, I did see that SL popped up at my local auction, and I went down to see it actually on my birthday. And it was just sort of love at first sight. And I ended up bidding on the car, ended up buying it. And my partner said to me afterwards, I knew you'd buy that car. I saw your face when you looked at it, and I knew you'd buy that car. And I absolutely love that car. I love the way it makes me feel when I drive the SL. Whenever I go out, and it's always people looking, there's people waving, there's people smiling, there's people, as you drive past, people returning around to look at it. I remember going down the motorway to a show last year in it, and the amount of people I could see as they overtook me. I think I was just cruising down the motorway, just doing 60 at the time, and people were overtaking me. And I just remember people looking and people looking around and looking, seeing what was going on, seeing who's driving the car. And every time I go out in that car, I feel so special. It's a bit of a pain in the backside. That car, admittedly, has cost me quite a bit more money than I thought it was going to. And there's still work that needs to be done on that car. But every time I go out in that car, it just makes me feel so special. I'm so proud and so lucky to own that. I do feel like I own a piece of history. Is there anything else that I feel like I would love to own? Possibly an AMG. I'm sort of really liking sort of a late 90s, early 2000s AMG of some sort, whether it's like a W210 or something like that. I would love one of those. Um, but at the moment, I'm sort of feel like I've got enough cars to keep me busy. And also, if I had an AMG, I want something completely different. It's no secret that I quite like an AMG GT after driving one at Mercedes-Benz World. And it's also no secret, particularly to my fiance, who is wonderful and puts up with my obsession with cars and Mercs, that I do regularly go Auto Trade to keep a track on the prices. And all I can say is they are coming down, slowly but surely. They are depreciating. So possibly one day, you never know what might turn up. But for now, I'm happy with the cars that I've got. I think I've got a good selection that represent my passion for cars. So that, in a nutshell, is my passion for Mercedes, and that's a little bit of a background of why I've sort of owned these cars. Admittedly, this car I never tended to go out and buy, but I now love. The SL was a car I loved and went out and bought. The B Class is a car that does everything I wanted to do very practically, never really caused me any trouble. So each of the cars I love for different reasons. I love them all because they represent my passion for Mercedes. They each have a job to do, they each have a purpose, they each represent a certain aspect that I like about Mercs, whether it be a practical box and wheels that's very reliable, that's built really well, whether it be a nice sort of modern classic that I can use a bit more, for driving. However, it's a classic car that's an absolute icon and that people point to and say that's a proper Mercedes, that's a true Mercedes. It's interesting when people talk about the SL, slightly side note here, but it's interesting when people talk about the SL and they talk about what's peak Mercedes. And usually they'll say it's a 107 or 123. There are lots of other cases of that, but generally it's a 123 or a 107. So I'm going to throw the question back out to you guys. I'd love to hear what you're passionate about. It doesn't have to be Mercedes. I'd love to hear what cars you own that represents that passion. I'd also love to hear how you got passionate about that brand. So once again, if you could hit that subscribe button, I've got this goal this year of trying to get to 1,000 subscribers. I'm currently just over 700. So if you could hit that subscribe button, that would be absolutely amazing. It's completely free of charge to do, and the benefit you get out of it is you get to see more of this and see more of my cars as well. So thank you very much. So I'm going to wrap this up for today. Thank you very much for watching. So it's going to be goodbye from me, goodbye from the SLK, and we'll see you very soon. Goodbye.